Good evening, everybody, and what is up? Welcome back to Gone Digging, live from the Relic Room. My name is Matt. Got a little flack tonight because the greatest of all time Jeopardy game is on, but you know what? You can watch that on a replay. We would rather have you here tonight with us. We've got a great group of folks here hanging out with us, and this is the first live stream of the year. So we took a little bit of a break between work, family, and the holidays, but we're super glad to be bringing you the best live streaming content here on YouTube in the treasure hunting community. So it's a treasure hunting or Treasure Tuesday. So I hope everybody had a great holiday, made it through safe, sound, all of that stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and roll in our guest for this evening. We have Rick from Dig Dive Discover on Instagram. He's just started a YouTube channel, and we are going to go see if we can slide him on in here. Rick, what is up, my man?
Hey, how's it going?
I am great. How are you? You've had a pretty busy day today, right?
Yeah, I'm tired, man. I'm a little bit beat. I just got back from a hunt today, and then day before yesterday, I was on a hunt as well.
So, and probably if you're like we are with the Gone Digging crew, when you're out for eight solid hours, pretty much as a minimum, right?
Yeah, usually by the time you get up, geared up, and get to the dive site and dive and get home, it's pretty much an all-day thing. And this time of year, it's especially challenging. You know, it gets dark so early, so we're pretty much up very, very early. We were in the water today, I think, by like 7 o'clock. So,
yeah, right on, man. That makes for early evenings and later nights as well.
Yeah.
But so I found your channel on Instagram first, or your page on Instagram, and then YouTube after diving around a little bit, literally and figuratively. Let's take it back to the beginning. How did you get into, I guess, for the folks who don't know, tell everybody what you do, and then let's talk about how you got into it.
Yeah. So I actually got into it through diving. I was a diver first. I was actually working at a dive shop. So I was out of the military, fresh out of the military, did 5 years there, and I got out. I started to go to college. So I was like, get a part-time job, make some money, And I started working at a dive shop because I love diving, and I eventually became an instructor at that dive shop. So I was instructing students, and I was doing a little bit of spearfishing as well. I was spearfishing commercially for a couple of years there, which was a lot of fun. And I'll go back to that in a little bit, but the spearfishing for me was always about trophy hunting, and it was always just odd that I would go out and do all this work and I'd get these fish, and all you really got was a picture from it. And that always kind of, I wanted something more, and then later on I found fossil hunting. But it wasn't until my mentor who got me into fossil hunting was actually doing a class locally at our dive shop. And I got pretty lucky with that because this is like one of the, he literally wrote the book. I've got it right here. So his name is Dr. Bob Sinibaldi, and he's a long-time fossil diver, which is unique. A lot of people go looking for fossils, but he was specifically doing it on scuba. And he was doing it back when, scuba was pretty new, and most people were just getting their feet wet in the Caribbean. And this guy was like, I'm going to jump into some dark water rivers and freaking tear it up and look for shark's teeth. So it was unique that he happened to live by me, and he was working in the dive shop, and he was doing fossil classes, which is even more rare for someone who's good at something to kind of go out and bring people into that hobby. And I went and assisted him as a dive master on a class of his in the Peace River, and I think that was about, I don't know, probably about 6-7 years ago, and found my first megalodon shark's tooth, and that was it. I was hooked. So
that one tooth was like, man, I'm done with this clear water. I'm done with fishing. Let's just find fossils.
Man, I drove home that day from the river, and it's a tradition I still have. I just hold on to it. I'm sure a lot of people do. Your newest finds is so spectacular. I don't think I let that thing go all night. It was a good tooth, man. It was like an inch long tooth, not huge, but it was all there, 100% there, complete. And it just was so fascinating to me that I found that, I discovered it, and it was just sitting there. And then you start thinking, well, gosh, there's got to be a ton of them out there. I'm going to go start finding these all the time. And that's exactly what I did. And I teamed up with another guy at my dive shop, and me and him just, I think the next a couple weeks, we had kayaks and we were at the Peace River, man, with our dive gear. And luckily, we had the leg up. We already knew how to dive. We knew how to do it safely. We knew how to get into some kind of those conditions that are a little bit challenging, especially for a new diver. We had all that, wasn't really a concern for us. So we just went really, really hard, and we had a really great first season.
So, and most people think about scuba diving as a recreational like sport, or they always think about, oh, you go to the tropics, you put on all your gear, you get on a dive boat, and you go out and you look at coral reefs and fish and things like that. But like probably if there's out of 100%, there's probably, I would say, only like 1 or 2% of the scuba diving community that actually dives in the kind of stuff that you dive in, right?
I think so. And honestly, the people who dive in the conditions I dive in, it's usually through necessity. So you got a lot of firefighters and first responders, right, who are trained to go into these conditions to retrieve weapons or bodies, if that's the case. And then you've got other guys that are doing technical work. They're working on docks. They're working on underwater structures in and around this water that just happens to be limited to no visibility. It's rare to find someone who's like, you know what, I'm going to just jump in here just because I want to and go looking for like fun. Yeah, but there's definitely a select group of people. You'll see them if you get online, and it's a small niche, but I think it's growing, especially as some of these really large influencers start to kind of expose the hobby a little bit. I think people are fascinated by not only fossils and artifacts, but just discovery in general. I mean, look at some of the guys on YouTube that are just diving rivers, finding human stuff. They're just finding modern trash, drones and iPhones and stuff people lost. And it's the thrill of that discovery to think that something's just sitting there, kind of like treasure, just waiting to be found. And I think that's capturing a lot of people's attention. And it's good. It's great to see. I love that. But for me as a dive instructor first, it definitely gives me pause as well, because I'm always talking to new people who are eager to get into the fossil hunting and to get into the hobby, and I'm excited for them. But then I stop and I say, listen, one step at a time. Like if you're going to get certified, just get certified first, and log a couple dives in some good conditions. You're going to need that, and maybe gradually get into it and find a buddy, find someone who's done it, and never attempt that personal first alone. And so that aspect can be somewhat scary, but I think people who are getting into it venture into it at the right pace, right? And if anything else, it's kind of the fear that keeps them safe. So, and the alligators. I didn't even talk about the alligators. It's the alligators too, and the snakes and all that stuff. So,
yeah, maybe I'm not the best person. I've been rogue for a while, and it's not. I'm the bad apple in the whole bunch, but. It's it is exciting, and it is I think when you talk about just diving alone, adding the challenges of diving, let alone the challenges of recording something and then successfully retrieving something. But it's funny about talking about driving home with that artifact in your hand. I've done that 100 times, right? But for me, I'm a guy who started out metal detecting. That's back to you too, right?
Yeah. That's today's.
Yep, there you go.
Yeah. So that's today's tooth that I got. It's a chub, and it's sitting right here on my desk with a couple other things that I got today. And to this day, it's I'll probably stare at this for a couple of days. And before it goes to the shelf or whatever, definitely still do it.
But I'm used to going and I'm the same way. So I have a Civil War bullet sitting right here, and I'm used to going, man, who was the guy who fired that, right? But you're thinking in the millions of years to at some point either the near like hundreds of thousands of years to millions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do collect mainly two things: fossils and artifacts. And so artifacts, like you kind of can wrap your head around. Those are really crazy to think about. Some human actually made that, and someone lived, and someone died, and someone lost it eventually. And so that to wrap your head around that, I think is more in our realm of understanding than to try to think back 20 to 30 million years. I've got some shark's teeth. This is one here. This is an Angustidan shark's tooth, and you can see it's got the side cusps on either side.
Just come back a little bit other way towards your face. There, right there, perfect.
So you got the side cusps here, and so this is a transitional shark's tooth. This is like predates Megalodon, and I guess the point I'm getting at is really, really old. It's millions of years old, but how do you really conceptually wrap your head around that amount of time? It's just ridiculous to think about. So it is, and it's every time you find one, you got to think, this is a real animal that really lived, and you're not just reading about it in some book. You're not at a museum, or who knows where they found that. It's just, you just stumbled upon it, and that animal and that creature was swimming or living and thriving, right where you were. And it definitely is humbling, but I don't think I can ever, sometimes I, barely start to scratch the surface of that timetable. You just start wandering. It's almost like thinking about outer space, right? It's incredibly hard to wrap your mind around it, but it's really fun and interesting. And I like to poke people sometimes to think about that amount of time and that time span that actually elapsed between when that animal lived and when we're finding the fossils.
Yeah, and that's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I think that's and like you said, that's the way that you can think of a Native American point, or even I don't know. I would have to imagine you run across, I mean, mid 1900s items to even into the 1800s items from time to time, and those are easy to think about. Like, oh hey, imagine being a settler in Florida losing this pipe bowl or whatchamacallit, whatever it is, or in the 1920s in Florida, working at a Coca-Cola bottling place. But to actually think of a fossil as something that was part of an animal that we are so far removed of is pretty difficult.
It is. And then the more recent fossils of Florida are equally, I think, is thought-provoking to think about. Like, for example, the Ice Age fossils. So these are things like Columbian mammoths, which, by the way, were larger than the woolly mammoth. Everybody knows a woolly mammoth. They go, oh, yeah, it just sticks in people's head. Well, the Columbian mammoth was bigger than the woolly mammoth, had bigger tusks, was almost, I want to say, about a third bigger, with no hair. And these things were just walking around Florida back when it was largely flat. The coastline probably extended another 30 miles out, and there were grasslands and meadows. And this animal was just walking around Florida as we know it, hanging out with giant ground sloths, saber-toothed tigers, and mastodons, which are kind of a smaller version with different teeth than the mammoth. And all these creatures, that most of them are extinct now or have kind of like microed down. They kind of shrink over time. Like, we've got regular size armadillos. Well, back then they had giant armadillos. You could ride on these things. The giant sloth, they stood 20 feet tall. They could reach their claws up and touch the top of an oak tree. So that is fascinating too when I find those types of fossils to think about. Well, maybe not millions of years ago, but during the last ice age, Florida was totally different. But it's still Florida. It's still right here. It happened in our backyard. It happens where I'm living, where I'm walking around. So it's really just interesting to think like that sometimes.
And I think the other part of is that you understand that. Think about I think about this in Virginia, about the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that have zero clue of the things that happen right below their feet.
Yeah, absolutely. People give me some flack sometimes. And again, I started filming for YouTube because I've actually, I was like, well, I'm doing this anyway, and I was encouraged by some people that I've worked with, and so I started putting some stuff out there. And one of the first things I realized is kind of the ignorance of people, and it's not. I don't think it comes from a bad place or malice, but they go, no, there's not shark's teeth in that creek. That thing's like 20 miles inland. Like, there's no sharks there, and you're like, what? No, you got to explain to them. They just don't even. No, they don't know that. You dig anywhere in Florida and you're going to hit ancient seafloor. They don't understand that. They don't understand why there's a horse tooth 30 miles offshore on Venice Beach, because it's water now. And so it is fun to kind of educate people sometimes, but it's also fun to see their reaction, on social media when you find somebody outside of the niche, outside of the hobby, that's just like, they don't believe it. They honestly don't. And I think that's part of the exciting thing about it, is it's
Do you
that
often
interesting.
get that same kind of reaction from people that you meet outside of just like, say, the internet? Like, you show somebody a shark's tooth or say a mastodon tooth, like what is the reaction that you get from that?
I think most people now kind of know about Megalodon, right? That's just mainstream. Megalodon is the poster child for fossils. It's simply the most common fossil. It's one of the most. It's actually just one of the coolest. You think about, it's the largest. Had the biggest bite force of any animal that ever existed ever, bigger than T-Rex. And this thing was a monster. It was a massive hunting machines. So that's like the poster child. But when I tell people about other things, like the giant ground sloth claw that I have, that's a 7-inch claw, and they look at that, and that captures the imagination. I can definitely see people sometimes with some disbelief, and even identifying fossils to people on the beach who kind of know what they're looking for. Take, for example, Venice Beach. I was down there not long ago, and this little girl was lucky enough to get a sliver of mammoth tooth. And just a sliver, unless you've seen a lot of mammoth teeth, you really aren't going to know what that is. But I told her, I said, that's actually from a mammoth. And her mom was just kind of pretty much thought we were just messing with her. And I'm like, no, it really is. And this is, but they're like, yeah, but why is it in with the shark's teeth? And it's just, so it just really goes to, it's fascinating for people, and they don't. A lot of people don't know what was going on in Florida during the Ice Age and what kind of fossils are actually uncovered here. And by the way, Florida has one of the most richest deposits of vertebrate fossils anywhere in our hemisphere. So this is the place where you find the cool stuff I think is cool, like the Pleistocene fossils, like mammoth, mastodon, all of the predators like the bear dog, the saber-toothed cat. Those are all coming from the east coast of the United States, whereas shark's teeth are known throughout the world. So I think that's a really cool distinguishing point to hit on, and I love educating people about their own place that they live as far as the fossil record.
And that's cool because, like, I always think about, I watch your videos and I watch some other guys' videos, and I'm like, man, like they find this stuff, and we have here in Virginia, we have a fantastic Eocene, is that right? Or Miocene layer as well with the megalodon, and then right off, but one, we never find great whites. I mean, it's just a little too late. And or very rarely if we do find them. But it's like, man, I'd love to find one of those fossils. But it's so cool that you can narrow down geographically where each kind of fossil, where it lies. Whether in this area versus other places. And you go out to Texas, and then they have Cretaceous period and Jurassic period stuff all the way up through the middle of the country, where you get like T-Rexes and raptors and stuff like that, which blows me away.
I think for the fossil hunter, it is a little bit of that. The grass is always greener. So I was talking to Frank Garcia recently. He's really well known in the fossil community, and he's out. His claim to fame was he found some of the most spectacular fossils ever discovered in Florida. He's got multiple species named after him. So this guy was a rock star, like back in the 80s and 90s, right? Well, now he's out digging dinos. And I'm over there like, man, I want a freaking Mosasaurus tooth. Like, that's, to me, the coolest thing in the world. But then I talked to some guys out there, and he was just saying, he's like, man, I miss finding vertebrate fossils. So it is really cool how you can travel the world, and you're going to be in totally different layers of time. And you're absolutely right. There's going to be fossils you just can't get. For example, the great white shark's tooth in Florida is actually rare for us as well. But if you go to South Carolina or North Carolina, they're quite common. And then there's fossils that are just specific to one area. Take, for example, like the terror bird. That's really only found in very isolated areas. And if you get one, if you're lucky enough to discover that, that's it. That's the area that they can be found in.
Yeah, that is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I'm sure we could just talk about bones all day long. But you not only do you dig and find fossils, but you also do a lot of Native American stuff.
Yes.
Is that something like, was that natural as well with the fossil diving? And you were like, well, there's Native Americans here that hunted these items.
Yeah. Well, of course, as I was fossil hunting, you come across the stray artifact. And unfortunately, maybe fortunately, I don't, depending on which way you look at it, in Florida, there's some laws around artifacts, right? So, for example, I can't keep any artifacts I find while I'm diving in Florida, because almost everything that I dive is considered state property if it's navigable. And even if it's not a navigable waterway, the laws get really blurry really fast. So in Florida, the only way to legally and ethically keep an artifact that you find is from private property, with that landowner's consent or permission. So, of course, as I'm fossil hunting, I'm stumbling on some artifacts, and I think they're pretty cool. And I'm like, man, how can I, get one of these legally and keep it and share it? So that's when I started, reaching out to some fossil hunters and saying, hey, do you guys do any artifact and relic searching? Because it's kind of like a lumped in hobby, right? Somebody who's fossil hunting or artifact hunting usually owns a metal detector too, or they look for bottles once in a while. I think it's the thrill of the discovery. So I started reaching out to some friends of mine, and I was very fortunate to fall into a group here in Florida who we basically lease some land and we operate it, and we basically dig for the artifacts. That way we can legally keep them. So we are on a piece of property that is an ancient campsite of sorts, and it's just littered with arrowheads, but we have to go through the labor of actually digging with a shovel to get those out.
So, and that's really cool too, because the way that you guys excavate for arrowheads or points or scrapers or knives, whatever, it's way different than what we traditionally do here in Virginia. In the old days in Virginia, you could go across a plowed field and you could walk after rain and find them. And I don't know if you follow any of the guys from Heartbreaker Relics. They concentrate in creeks as well. And the laws thing I was going to touch on, but so how do you locate, like, do you know that, like, when I spoke with the guys from Heartbreaker Relics who have a fantastic channel, they talk about different land grades and the fact that a lot of the villages and stuff would be set up higher around riverbanks and water systems where they could hunt and fish and grow crops and stuff like that. Or is it the same kind of setup, or is it just because it was all grassland, they were following the migratory animals of the time?
No, it was very similar. And so if you back up 1,000 years ago to where a lot of the artifacts start becoming interesting, and you go to about 5,000 to 9,000 years ago, which is kind of the span of Native Americans in Florida, you find largely the same thing. However, Florida during that time was actually more arid and dry and cool than it is now. And the karst topography of Florida was not like it is. There was not fresh water abundantly available everywhere because the coast went out so many miles, and the Floridan aquifer was so much deeper. So for us, the key thing to find is usually an ancient water source. Trying to find, even if it doesn't exist today, we might get on topo maps and look for depressions or sinkholes or places that are just hot spots, like the Santa Fe River or the Rainbow River. These are places that have known to be in existence during those times. Although I'll say with the Rock City Relic guys, they do a lot of great, and I wish we could hunt like they do, but we just can't go into the creeks, into the rivers. So we have to get a little more creative. So I would say we start with the hot spots, right? So we obviously have information and know if artifacts are being found in a creek and in a river. So then we say, okay, well, they're there and we can't access them legally. So where can we zoom out to? Is there property somewhere that could be where those are washing in at? So we kind of have to do one more step than those guys, I think. And then we could find the most epic place ever to look for relics and to hunt for relics. And then we have to get some kind of landowner's permission. But it's actually really, really challenging in Florida, especially if you're going to do it legally and ethically. And being on social media, that we have no choice. I'm not going to go out and break any laws or collect any arrowheads. It's a tough nut to crack when you find something and you got to kind of take a picture of it and set it back down. But those are the laws as they're written. But that's what motivated me to go out and to find some land and to pay money to lease and to bring a group of guys together to share those expenses. And that's what we do now. We're very, very lucky and fortunate to have that, because very few places in Florida does that kind of operation exist. So definitely proud of that.
And that's cool, man. And I think you hit on something. It's Ezra said, legally and ethically. I mean, everybody can go, man, I don't know, is this legal, is it illegal, whatever, especially when you get into those lines. And here in Virginia, we have the same thing. We have a permit system that we're allowed to go to tidal bodies of water, recover artifacts, but report them to the state. Well, that tidal area gets really gray when you move 200 miles inland from the ocean. And, I think that's really incredible that, you can nail that down. And in the end, you're still doing the legwork and you're still doing the research, but you're right. You do have to take it to the next level and convince somebody, hey, I want to dig this giant hole in your yard or your piece of property. I'm going to take care of it when I'm done, but this is what I'm looking for. And I imagine you get some head scratches with that.
it's a tough sell, and to be honest, that was actually one of my motivating factors to start a social media. That's actually why I started Instagram. I think like 9 or 10 months ago. Was I said, you know what, I'm going to kind of put it all out there. I'm going to start networking a little bit, because there's got to be other people out there who can help us all find more stuff. And it's been going really well. We've got a small group of people that have kind of put their heads together and said, okay, let's brainstorm some ways to get on some more legal sites. And I recommend that highly to anyone in Florida that's looking to find an artifact. Go ahead and get online, get on Facebook, join some groups, meet some people, and just start putting your feelers out, because the challenges are there. But the good thing is Florida is a mecca for fossils, and it's also a mecca for artifacts. They're everywhere. There's a lot of them. It's abundant. You just gotta do the work to find it.
Yeah, that's cool, man. And I think that's interesting. I think there's power in numbers that we also generally don't find that is the key for, most of the metal detector guys of old were these loners, these guys who went out in fields or, whatever, or artifacts hunters were kind of the same way, because there becomes a trust issue when you begin to find, you find something cool or that other people want to be a part of. How do you go about like finding like-minded people that share the same values as you?
And that's challenging too. And as I just said, that last thing, I'll put it out there to people. It doesn't make sense to jump on Facebook either and say, hey, give me a site, give me somewhere to go, because we get those all the time, people who don't want to put any work in. But from what I've seen and what I could recommend to people is just go out and start finding whatever you can on your own. Hit the creeks if you're looking for fossils. Start walking some fields. That's a great place to start, by the way. Plowed fields, are turning up soil. So that's, even in Florida, that's a valid way to find artifacts. Start knocking on some farmers' doors, or, be as polite as possible. Try to bring something to the table, but do your own stuff first. Then you can get on these social media sites like these Facebook pages and these groups, and just try to be, I always just, whether I'm collaborating with another fossil hunter or trying to find a new site to dig, I just try to bring as much to the table as I can. And that's how I've always been. And I've found that if I bring a lot to the table, then I'm likely going to get that in return. But you're right. People are going to guard their sites jealously, right? It's like fishing. People put a lot of man hours, money, work, time, resources into finding these places. They're not just going to give them up to some guy on the internet they don't know. But it changes the conversation a little bit when you approach someone and say, hey, man, I really like the stuff you're finding. I'm following your page. Hey, I found some stuff. Do you want to come check it out? And just give those invitations out. And vet who you're going to share with carefully. Just try to make those strategic relationships of people that you see that are genuinely into the hobby that you're into, and just kind of take it slow. And sure, you're gonna meet some wackos out there that just are looking for an easy place to hunt, and that's all they care about. But I think more often than not, you're gonna find someone on the other end of that who's genuinely interested in expanding their own body of knowledge and their hunting sites. And it took me a while to get past that. Honestly, the first couple of years of me and my buddy hitting the river, there's no way we would have invited anybody out. We were just like, no, this is ours. We put the work in. And it wasn't until a couple of years after that I kind of said, you know what, I need to start including some other folks. I need to bring some other people out. It didn't mean that I just went on Facebook and I just put like an invite party and had like 1,000 people come to the river. It just meant that I was a little more open to it. And I've got to say, it's paid off more than it hasn't. I've been burned a couple times. A couple of dudes I've taken them out, and maybe it happens. They take your site and they go there, and who cares? But you got to put yourself out there a little bit, because I fully believe that the more you share within this hobby, whatever it is, metal detecting, bottle finding, whatever it is, the more you can bring other people into it. You're putting more eyes on the ground, and now instead of just you looking for somewhere, you could have a team of 4 or 5 or however big you want to get. And I've kept mine pretty small, but to this day, I think we've got a tight group of maybe 10 or 15 guys that are constantly out there looking for new opportunities. And if I bring one opportunity to the table in a year, and they all bring one opportunity to the table in a year, it's 15 new places to hunt instead of just one.
Yeah, so it can be generally more than what you can efficiently do in probably a year or maybe even 2.
When we first started, we were struggling to find spots. We were putting hundreds of hours in to get one spot. Now I've got too much to hunt. I can't even get to them all, so I have to pick what's going to be the best, or what do we think we want to do, or what's new? Because you get to that point where you just got you've got plenty of resources, but you got to build up to it. It's not going to happen in your first year in the hobby, and probably not even your third year. It's going to take some time, and it depends on how much work you put into it.
I think there's a lot to be said for reputation as well.
Yeah.
You build that quality reputation where people know that, one, you find things, but two, you're passionate about it. And with your stuff, I mean, it's pretty easy to see, and I can understand why you have that quality group of guys. Real quick shout out to Bradley Height. Thanks for the super chat, my friend. Thanks for coming and supporting the channel. If you guys have any questions, be sure to throw at Gone Digging in the chat room, and I will try to get that. Michael Busy Be Detecting asked, just general area, where in Florida are you from?
I'm from Sarasota, Florida, which is great. It puts me smack in the middle of a pretty great place. I travel to North Florida frequently to hunt. That's about 2 to 3 hours from me. I travel to the Peace River quite often, and also some of the rivers in Tampa Bay. So I would say South Central Florida, and then the East Coast. Really great location to be. But if you're in Orlando or North Florida, you can do the same. But I would say basically from about as far south as Sarasota all the way up to North Florida is some really prime hunting area.
Yeah, that is awesome. That's good for me because I will be in Florida in February, and I can't wait.
Yeah.
So I just got to have one day I'm going to get myself a dry suit for here in Virginia, and it will be nonstop diving.
Heck yeah, I'm sure you guys have some pretty good rivers up there. You're definitely in the right spot.
Yeah, we do pretty good. I won't say that it's we focus on a lot of artifacts, but it's funny because I won't pass up a tooth when while looking for artifacts, and a lot of the stuff is the same with you. It's all intermixed in layers. What I really find interesting is that like the horse and mammal stuff, just like the mammal stuff blows me away, or the vertebrates. But so my friend, speaking of the Devil Heartbreaker Relics, nice to see you here. But my friend Just Dirt Fishing asked, what's the deepest you've dived before? But I guess more importantly, I would turn that into what kind of equipment are you using right now? You guys aren't always diving, right?
Well, my name is Dig Dive Discover, so yeah, it's pretty much I'm either digging or diving. It's kind of there's a joke around here, but it's true. That's my name is really what I do. I'm either out digging for artifacts, and of course in Florida that's the only way, or I'm diving. I am a dive instructor. We mentioned that earlier in the show, but I'll say it again. So my background was diving first, so I was a pretty accomplished diver, technical diver, as a dive instructor. I've done some dives down to about 200 feet, so I had some pretty technical stuff under my belt before I got into scuba. But really, what I do now mostly is just regular open circuit scuba. So it's nothing special, pretty much running a scuba tank, a set of gear, and then maybe modifying it for the rivers. The rivers we have to contend with things like limited visibility, strong current, entanglement opportunities, underwater hazards like logs, boat traffic, and then of course the one that's actually in the back of our mind, which really I think is one of the lower concerns, but it's probably all the way up here, is the wildlife, the alligators, the snakes. So the gear is important, but what's more important is being comfortable in the gear. So that way, all of these risks that I just mentioned, you can minimize them. And again, there's going to be risks. There's going to be risks in any type of diving, and there's probably going to be more with fossil diving or anytime you enter limited visibility. So I always tell people, you need to be the best diver you can be so that you can manage those risks and bring them to a level that's acceptable to you. There are going to be people in this world that no level, they're not going to be okay with any risk that involves an alligator, right? But then there's going to be people that are like, okay, I can minimize those risks by doing certain things, making my presence known, looking for them, moving slow and methodically in the water, and then they're okay with that. So you just got to find what level is acceptable to you. But I would say mostly it's just regular scuba. And it depends on where I'm at. Florida's pretty shallow, so most of our rivers during the low season when we dive them, 7 to 15 feet. But I also travel to South Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina, and those rivers, especially towards the coast, can be a lot deeper, 40 to 60 feet deep, with absolute pitch black darkness at the bottom, and then very strong current to contend with. And I'll modify my gear accordingly. But recently, I just started using a new piece of equipment, an electronic hookah.
Yeah. So I was gonna say that's super cool. That's the Air
Yeah.
Buddy system, right?
It's actually called. It's very new. In fact, it just got launched on Kickstarter. Is how they were able to manufacture that. It's the son of the Browning third lung, who's kind of engineered this and is bringing it to market. So old time, long time history within the family of building hookah systems. But of course, we're talking, many, many years of producing the gas powered typical hookah system. And I've always kind of strayed away from those. They're bulky, they're loud. If I'm going to lug around a motor that needs all this attention and all this maintenance, I'll just buy a tank and just deal with transporting my gear to the dive site. So this was kind of, when I saw it on the market, it was kind of gimmicky looking, but I said, you know what, I'll give it a shot. And I actually ended up linking up with that guy, and the owner's son was like, hey man, I think what you're doing is cool. So he came out with us for a dive, which was phenomenal. It was a really cool experience. But what I was actually impressed with was how much of a good utility and tool that this system is. It weighs 5 pounds. The battery is lithium ion, and that's pretty much the technology that's making this stuff possible. And I can carry it around with me and pop it in the water. It can go down to 10 feet, and I don't have to wear a big old fat steel tank. I don't have a lot of weight on me. Literally, I just put my weight belt on, my mask, my flashlight, and I just go. So it's made in and out, in and out, in and out, once a pretty hard task on your body really, really easy.
That's super cool. And so with the hookah setup, and I see some folks in the chat talking about how they've looked into them and things like that. But with that hookah system, you still should have some diving knowledge, right?
Absolutely. Definitely. It doesn't replace, any kind of training. In fact, that was one of my problems with the hookah systems for many years as a dive instructor. People getting hurt all the time during many season in Florida because they would neglect to be, they're like, oh, well, I don't have to be scuba certified. They didn't make that correlation. So definitely I would say this is not like an answer for someone who's maybe doesn't want to get certified. I think this is just a tool in a diver's toolbox. And what's cool about this company is they're understanding these risks as well, and they're addressing them too. If you are not a certified diver and you buy this hookah system, at the very least, this website has a really good short class that you can take that kind of explains the top things to be concerned about. Obviously, the first thing, never holding your breath. A very simple concept for divers to understand, but a very critical one and something that most people who aren't dive certified may have no idea about. So they're addressing those concerns. And of course, there's limitations to the system, right? Obviously, the first one is it only goes 10 feet. So if I'm in a hole in the river and it happens to be 12 feet and I have this system with me, I'm kind of screwed. So you really need to know your dive site, know where you're going, and know the conditions to be able to tell if this is going to be, something that you can use or not. So I don't think it's replacing scuba anytime. I'm certainly not, trying to sell my tanks or my dive gear, but I'm definitely going to be bringing it with me more often just to, if anything, just to kind of save my fatigue over the day. Because like you said in the beginning of the show, we put in long hours. Most of my dive trips are all day affairs, and we're probably putting 4 to 6 to 8 hours underwater. And so if I can do something to alleviate, dragging that gear around, getting my tanks filled constantly, I'm definitely going to look into it. And the price point, by the way, is right on the thing. If you guys want to check it out, it's I'm not even affiliated with them yet, so it's just a pretty honest review. But it's called the Blue Nemo. And you can check them out, and they're taking, I think, back orders now. So it's been hugely popular and really, really well received.
Cool, man. We will. I will put that in the description, or we'll link that somehow post show. And we've got a bunch of great folks hanging out here. That's really cool, man. And I love how technology influences the evolution of basically treasure hunters. It blows my mind to think about in 10 or 15 years, are we going to be like, what's that under the sea thing where they have these mouth breathers that's all they use to breathe and filter water for oxygen, I don't know, but it's super interesting to think about and probably in that same time period, we'll look at the same junk we lost when we were out diving and go, why the heck were we using that? Or, you know.
I think we're seeing it already. I mean, look at the invention of LiDAR, and they're discovering all kinds of things over in the Aztec ruins. But look at something simple. I think we live in a golden age of scuba. You know, we look back on the guys that were diving in the 50s and 60s, whether it's for relics and fossils, and we're so green with envy because we're like, oh, they got to all the good stuff first. I don't think like that. I think we are in the perfect age where scuba was tried and tested and kind of came to a point where it's finally effective. And come on, what about a dive light? Like, do you think these old guys like Bill Royal, who were the first ones in the water, had a 3,500 lumen light that they could carry in their hand? So, you know, I get stuck in that thought process sometimes. I'm like, man, I just wish I could have been around in the Santa Fe River back when, you know, it was like this. But honestly, there's so much out there still being exposed and still falling into the rivers that we've got to take a step back and think, man, we've got scuba equipment that's accessible and affordable. We've got dive lights that are the most powerful they've ever been and also affordable. And we've got, we can travel like we've never been able to travel before. So I think we're in a really cool spot if you want to get into this hobby and you want to be a relic hunter or a fossil hunter. It's a great time. It's absolutely perfect time.
And I think the thing that we often forget is that over time, we're going to have access to places that those guys didn't because underwater topography changes with the movement of currents, you know, floods and things like that, you know. I mean, I don't know how many sites you have, but we have sites that we go back to every year and consistently find the same amount of fossils throughout that whole year because of the changing of the bottom, whether it's due to erosion or shifting of currents or just tides.
Yeah, we jokingly call it the fossil growing season here because in Florida, it's a very seasonal type of hunt. I know in some of the East Coast rivers, it's doable most of the time of the year. Well, in Florida, the rivers get really low and then they get really high. So we always say, yeah, the fossils are growing right now. We've got about 4 to 6 months out of the year where it's the river's just raging and it's just uncovering new material. And then we go out, and I've got a spot we were actually diving just recently called Old Reliable because, what you know, the first of every season, as long as we're the first ones on that spot, we'll get 30 or 40 megs every time. And it's baffling because you look back on last season, you're like, man, we put in 5 tanks and we did all this work there. There was not a meg to be found. We promise you. But then, boom, there it is. Everything's just all mixed back up. Stuff that was uncovered is now, exposed, and the walls of the river have come in, and the river might have meandered 3 feet to the right. So you've got all this movement, and you're absolutely right. I think until every square inch of land is dug up or exposed by a river, there's just going to be so many fossils out there. It's crazy.
Yeah, and Michael Busybee said that only 2% of the shipwrecks have been found in Vermont. And I think that's kind of the same kind of thing. But you're not limited just to rivers, right? You go out in the ocean as well, right?
Yeah, I'm open for anything. I do go to Venice a lot, and I say Venice as a general area, but pretty much the entire coast from Venice all the way to really Clearwater or Tampa. There's Megalodon shark's teeth out there too. You really just have to be in the right place where it's eroded down, or for whatever reason, the layer that it was deposited in is now exposed. But Venice is very famous for that. And in fact, I sat this here because I wanted to hold it up at some point today if I can get that right. Nope, it's this way.
Let's go just a little bit back towards your face. Dude.
All right. So this is a really nice, we call it golden beach color. I don't know if the colors come through real well, but check out my Instagram page, Dig Dive Discovery. You'll see some of these shark's teeth. But the reason I'm holding this one up is it's a really big tooth. But also, I found that on a shore dive from Venice Avenue, which is could not be any more of a known location. It's Venice Beach from Venice Ave. Literally I walked from the parking lot from my truck down into the water, kicked out till I hit 19 feet, dropped down, and that was still sitting there. So it's never hunted out, and even the most famous sites are still producing. So can you imagine that, what's still being produced at these sites that, take a little bit more effort to get to. And I always recommend new fossil hunters and artifact hunters, and I'm sure any type of person looking for things that are old or rare or valuable, get off the beaten path a little bit, Don't just stop, one bend up from the boat ramp. That's what everybody does. Go a little farther, go a little deeper. And that certainly pays off, but it doesn't mean that you still can't find stuff right by the boat ramp, because I'm not scared to look by the boat ramp. I'm not scared to look behind the diver in front of me, because there's always stuff that gets missed. It just does.
Yeah, it's one of those things we say in like the relic hunting community, you can't find it all. No matter what the site is, whether it's American Civil War, Spanish American, or even like say like some of the Florida forts with the Seminole Wars, you could go and metal detect it, or you could go and dive it 1,000 times, but you'll never find every artifact that was ever lost there.
That's true, and I couldn't agree more. And that's why I don't mind promoting the hobby. I don't mind talking about it. I don't mind if people are going to go to the Peace River and hunt just because they saw my video, because there's going to be stuff there. You just got to look hard enough. You got to get creative, and I think you got to take advantage of the new technology. And you do those things, you're going to be just fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess this is probably a good time. So over your evolution of finding fossils and arrowheads and I mean really incredible stuff. And what I'll do real quick is we'll put up your Instagram on the stream real quick for everybody to see. There's Rick's Instagram. That tooth in your photo, your profile is off the charts. But you have a lot of cool stuff from your mastodon, your megalodon teeth, but collaborations with other people, and there's a lot of videos for everybody to check out. And I really encourage you to go check that out. To previous military service in there, standing in front of that giant poppy field. But I encourage everybody in the chat to go check that out. There's some beautiful artifacts and relics and things like that in there, and maybe even an alligator bite.
Yeah, I tell you, we get asked a lot frequently about alligators in the river, and for many years we were kind of like, yeah, no, never had a problem. It's been good. I think it's a statistical thing, but eventually, I think it was last year, we were actually diving with a friend of ours, Jake. He's really popular on YouTube. His handle is D Almighty, and D Almighty, but some people pronounce it differently. It's DALLMYD, and he's also known as Scuba Jake. But he was doing some collaborations with us, and he was out with me and my friend Henry, who I've been diving with a long time. And Henry did get bit by an alligator, so it was a relatively minor incident, thankfully. But we think we knew what went wrong, and we've learned from it. Basically, we usually move upriver, pretty strategically. We go slow, we look, we go slow, we look, just so we're not bumping into stuff. Well, he happened to be kind of forgetting about some of that. He was just drifting downriver, trying to get back to a little fossil bed that he was working previously, and we're pretty sure he just smacked right into this thing. It could have came up on him, we don't know, but it bit onto his leg, it went through his neoprene, through his fin. We ended up seeing it back on the surface a little while later. It was probably about we want to say 7 to 8 foot alligator. So probably pretty equally matched in size to him, maybe a 150, 200-pound animal. But with a little bit of effort, he was able to kind of kick at it, shake it off, and it did disengage from biting him. And so that's kind of like giving us, a reminder to, respect them, to just really be aware of your surroundings. But yeah, that video went pretty viral, of course. It's, unfortunate that it did, because it's not really what he wanted to be known for. He wanted to be known for finding lots of fossils. Now he's the gator attack guy, but it's actually just serves as a really important reminder, though, to people that don't go into the rivers, don't get into these hobbies, and engage in them until you're absolutely ready. So take it one step at a time, because we were out there and we thought we were pretty knowledgeable and stuff, but we slipped up, and that happened. So
yeah, absolutely. I had folks asking us to continue, but we've made it all the way up to almost an hour. So I guess probably didn't think that when you started your channel or your Instagram that you would be at this point. I won't say that being on my show is a highlight of your hits reel, but where do you think that you'll see yourself in the future with this? Where do you think that scuba diving will take you besides underwater?
I've got some ambitions. Really, putting stuff on YouTube kind of just made sense because I actually wanted to start, documenting my trips better just for me. And I was at this point starting to reach out to other people to get to better sites. And a lot of them were doing really well on YouTube and social media. So I started all my social medias about 9 months ago. And it's just been really fun to see everybody engaging with me. It's honestly been really, really cool to see people giving me support and asking me questions. I get messages that really just make you feel good for putting some stuff out there. So I'm not going to stop doing that, but it's not my primary focus either. I'm just out there to find stuff. So my goal for the next couple of years is I want to do a lot more rock hounding. I've done a couple trips looking for amethysts and looking for Herkimer diamonds and agatized coral. And I gotta tell you, it's a lot of fun. I really like it. So that's going to be something I want to transition to. I also want to transition to getting on some kind of gold or treasure. That's the ultimate, right? For someone who's into collecting treasure, whether it's a fossil or an artifact, nothing beats gold. So I've been talking to my friend Nugget Noggin and a couple people on YouTube. Pioneer Polly, I think I'm going to go up there and visit him soon. I want to dive for gold. But then I also want to make it, hey, I'm in Florida, so I want to go check out that stuff on the other coast over there too. So that's a priority of mine. So fossils, artifacts, rocks, minerals, and then any kind of gold, I think, is where I see myself going. And where I see myself going on social media is just to keep putting my stuff out there and hopefully continue to make a lot of new relationships and new people that I can bring something to the table to. And then they can return that. And so far, it's been paying off really well.
Yeah, it's cool, man. I have some of those same ambitions as well. We had Pioneer Polly on the show. I guess the spring of last year.
Awesome.
Great dude, super comical. Really enjoyed him. But yeah, man, it's funny. The world is full of treasure, and it's just where do you think you're going to get to go next?
Yeah, I'll go anywhere. I'll pretty much look for anything. I went bottle hunting a while back for the first time, and I never thought I would like it. I thought it was kind of stupid. But, man, if I wasn't in that hole digging for bottles as hard as I could and totally thrilled, when I was pulling out even broken pieces. So it's all treasure, man. Doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter what you're looking for as long as you found it. And it means something to somebody, whether it's just you or a whole bunch of people on Instagram that think it's cool. I say go for it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So if you could go scuba diving anywhere tomorrow and look for one item without restriction, where would you go?
Without restriction, I would be thrilled to death to be able to take one of the amazing points that we find in the rivers and keep it legally. So I'd probably go somewhere and get me a really nice artifact from Florida that could go into my collection and I didn't have to leave out there. So that would probably be what I would be looking for. As far as where I would go, probably North Florida is where I would go. I think that's my realistic answer, but honestly, I just want to get a whole bunch of doubloons over there from that wreck. So I would
so
be okay
we'll
with
say
that.
one of the 1715 fleets, man.
Yeah.
One gold Spanish escudo.
That's fine. I'm not greedy, man. Well, maybe like a gold bar too, but anything for that, like an emerald or something, I'm all about it. So that would be the one. And you know what?
I can completely respect that. It's man, I appreciate you coming and hanging out on the show with us this evening. It's been absolutely fantastic. I'm sure you have nothing but a bright future ahead of you in the land of treasure hunting. So, I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to tell all the folks in here.
I don't think so. If you tuned in, I really appreciate the support. Great stuff you're doing. I really like this format. I'm definitely going to be following you and the people you have on. And I'm sure you're going to get, if you've already had Pioneer Polly and Rock City Relics and these guys, I mean, you're definitely in there with some of these top performers, I think, in our niche. So I'm going to stay tuned. If anyone had a question they didn't get to that they want to ask me, I just love talking to everybody, man. I love social media because I'm just on my phone all the time meeting new people and chatting. So hit me up. The best place to do that is just Instagram. I check those messages. I actually really check them all. So DM me on Instagram. That's great. And then, of course, I am trying to grow that YouTube channel to meet more of those YouTube influencers. So if you get a second, pop on over there, check out some of my videos, and hopefully you like them, subscribe, and let's just keep in touch.
So right on, man. Right on. I'm going to slide you off to the side. We're going to close out the show, but don't go anywhere. All right, so awesome, man. So that is Dig, Dive, Discover. Rick, fantastic guest, incredible content, super personable dude, and incredibly knowledgeable. And that's what I love about this hobby. That's what I love about this show. I'm not able to bring you this every week because we set the bar high. Rick is a fantastic guest, and but we try to do our best every week to bring you treasure hunters and like-minded folks. So if you haven't, go over and give Rick some support on YouTube or Instagram. He's also got a Facebook page. All that stuff's included in the description. And really great dude. So really excited. I personally want to thank each and every one of you for coming and hanging out. That would take an extra 15 minutes. But I will leave you with this like I do every week. If you are able to go out, I hope you are able to go out and find some history. If you're not able to go out and find some history this week, I hope you go out and make history. My name is Matt. Thanks to our guest, Dig, Dive, Discover, for making an excellent episode, an excellent evening. We will see you next time right here on Gone Digging, live from the Relic Room.